you guys had any issues with shading your objects? Well, in this episode, I'm going to be showing you 6 different ways that I use to help me improve my light and shadow. Check it out. Okay guys, welcome to the very first episode. I am super excited that you guys are here. Thank you very much for stopping by. I really appreciate it. My name is Jose Vega. I'm a concept artist at outofjosevega.com. And in this channel, I just want to share with you guys my tips and tricks for Photoshop and digital painting. Now, this episode, we're going to be talking about light and shadow. So I'm going to be sharing with you guys 6 different ways that I use, or fundamentals that I use to keep my light and shadow in check, whether I'm drawing or painting. So let's take a look at it.
Alright guys, so let's get started with this. Now I have here a very simple scene of a picture of an egg and on top of a table, and we're gonna go through these 6 principles that I always keep in mind when I'm lighting my scenes. So let's start with the first one. Our first one is gonna be our center light. Now our center light is all the surfaces that have been affected by the source of light directly. Now in this case, my light source is coming from the left side here and coming in this direction. Now all these surfaces on the egg that are facing the light are going to be my center light. Now also, if I keep in mind my whole scene here, I have my table here, and my table is also going to have all these center light surfaces here that are being affected by the light source directly. Now this is very important because the table is going to affect a lot my scene because of the way the light is affecting the table. We're gonna see that more in a minute as we go through these 6 fundamentals, but that's just a center light, just the surfaces that have been affected by the light source directly. Now our second one is gonna be our form shadow. Now our form shadow is a shadow created by the turning away of the form. Now in this case we have an egg, which is a very spherical form, and all these faces that are facing on the opposite direction of the light source are going to create a shadow because the light source is not hitting those areas directly. So also in this case it's very vertical. We have a very soft transition here in between the center light and the form shadow. It's really soft, that transition. If it was a cube, for example, we'll have a harder edge, but since this is an egg, we have a softer transition here. So it's going to be our form shadow. After that's going to be our cast shadow. Now the cast shadow is a shadow created by another object or the surface blocking the light. Now we only have 2 surfaces here. We have the egg, we have the table, and the egg is blocking the light rays coming in this direction, in here like this. They're blocking here, being blocked by the egg, so they're not reaching the area here in black. So that's going to create a cast shadow. Now as you notice here, you can see a little bit of 2 edges here. We have a very soft edge here and we have a harder edge here, but we're gonna get more into what that is later on in a more in-depth video, but we're just gonna cover this whole area as our cast shadow. Okay, now after cast shadow we have ambient light or bounce light. Now this is where that central light on the table comes into play a lot, because the bounce light or ambient light is the light that bounces off the surfaces into other objects. So light rays are coming in this direction, for example, and they're bouncing or touching these areas here, which are central light, and they're bouncing off and touching another area and then bouncing off again, and so on and so forth. So this is very important because not also we have objects in our scene like here, we also could have objects outside our scene like a wall or another object that is casting bounce light onto my subjects in our scene. So it's very important to understand what's happening with the scene inside and outside the canvas, so we can actually take in consideration that bounce light. But in this case we have a lot of bounce light hitting the egg from the table, this area here, and that's why we are able to actually see it. So that's going to be our bounce light. Now ambient occlusion is our next one, and ambient occlusion is the shadow created by the occlusion of the ambient light that we previously talked about. So that's going to happen most of the time in surfaces that are really close to each other. So in this area over here, we have the egg, or the surface of the bottom surface of the egg, really close to the table, and that's a spot where the bounce light is going to be very hard to get into and light that area. So it's going to create a deeper shadow there because the ambient light is going to be hard to reach that point. And you can see here on the left side, it's a lot brighter because the light is actually coming from that side. So the bounce light, it's easier for the bounce light to reach that area, but in this area it's not. So we get that deeper shadow in there. Now we also have a little bit of reflection here because of the material of the table, but that's something extra. But that deeper shadow down there, that's gonna be your ambient occlusion. Now last one is gonna be your highlight. Your highlight is very subtle in this image, but you can see it right there. Let me circle that. And your highlight is gonna be the reflection of the light. So the most important thing that I want to mention about this is that the position of the highlight is gonna vary depend on your point of view or the camera's point of view in angle with the light source. So if I were to look at this same scene without changing the light source position, if I were to move and look this a little bit higher to the right or to the left, the highlight is going to change position. The central light is going to stay the same. So this is going to stay the same because the light source hasn't moved. But if I move, or I move the light source, my highlight is going to move depending on the angle from my point of view to the light source. So that's just something key to remember when placing the highlights. Now let's get into a little bit more complex forms here and try to identify these 6 things into a more complex scene. Now we have here a picture of Spider-Man, the figure of Spider-Man, and let's get into those 6 principles and try to identify them here. So the first thing that I want to do is try to identify where my light source is coming from. And in this case, my light source is coming from my top right, coming down like this. Okay, and I'll show you a trick to how to identify it real quick. So the first fundamental is going to be our center light. Now the center light, as we mentioned, is all the surfaces being hit by the light source directly. And let's simplify this a little bit by going here into the arm and simplifying this part of the arm here as a cylinder. It's gonna be a tricep muscle here, and let's just simplify this by dividing this into 3s here, like that. Now these faces here on top of my cylinder are facing more the light source. Right? So that's why that's going to be my center light. Now these faces here are facing away from my light source. These faces are facing even downward, more downward direction. So these up here are going to be my center light. All right, and the same happens to all these parts of the anatomy that are facing towards the light. That's going to be my center light. Now after center light, we have form shadow. Now form shadow, if you go back to the arm, are going to be these faces here that are facing away from the light source. They're facing away, okay? And this happens, for example, here. This is more like a cylinder as well. These faces are facing this direction, that's why they are in shadow, right? And that happens throughout the whole form of this anatomy. So after form shadow, we have cast shadows. Now cast shadows are the trick to know more accurately where the light is coming from. So I have these cast shadows here, and let me erase this. Now you can see here we have a harder, sharper shadow here and a sharper edge shadow there, right? That's gonna be my cast shadow, and that's because I have this part of the arm and shoulder here that is blocking the light to reach that area right there. So it is reaching this area, that's why we have it in light, a central light, but it's not reaching this whole area here. So it's gonna create a cast shadow here. And cast shadows usually have a harder edge than form shadows. So for example here, we have this cylinder type part of the muscle, and this is going around like that. So these are my central light, places that are being hit by the light source directly, and these are gonna be my form shadows. So form shadows here, you can see a very soft transition, and then in the cast shadow, you're gonna see a harder edge transition there. And the same thing with this part right here. Okay, so that's a cast shadow. After that, we have bounce light. Now bounce light here is key as well, because as you can see, it's lighting a lot of the bottom of the arm. So all these faces down here have been lit by the bounce light coming from the table. And this is what I was mentioning earlier, because the table, we don't see it on the scene, but it's actually affecting a lot of the scene. And all these bounce light that you see on the body here, here on the arm, all this, and same thing with all this right here. So all that is because of that table, because the table is receiving direct light, so it's bouncing off light rays up into my subject here, and it's lighting all that area. And as you can see here, we have a very clear distinction of central light, core shadow, and bounce light. Here we have bounce light, we have a core shadow, which is in between central light and bounce light, but we're talking about it as in form shadow, so we're gonna keep it very simple as form shadow, and then we get into core shadow later on. And my central light down here. All right, so that's gonna be my bounce light, very important. Now next one is gonna be our ambient occlusion. Now ambient occlusion here, it's very subtle as well. So for example here we have these two parts. We have the top of the arm and the shoulder connection here of the figure, and you can see a little line. It's creating a shadow there. That's gonna be your ambient occlusion. Same thing happens here. It's gonna be ambient occlusion because the bounce light is really hard for the bounce light to get into that spot. And you can see where all these regions are in the custom here, and here, and here, and here, and all that. So it's really hard for the ambient light to reach those spots, and that's gonna create a deeper shadow, which is your ambient occlusion shadow. And the last one is gonna be your highlights. Now highlights, again, is a reflection of the light, and you can see the spots here, here, here. See a little bit of here, here as well. So depending on the material, this is gonna change how big, how small, how intense it's gonna be. But just for you to know and differentiate the difference between highlight and central light and bounce light. You're gonna see another highlight here. Usually the highlight, something that I keep in mind is the highlight is on the central light, because the central light is being hit by the light source directly, so you're gonna have a highlight on that central light. Alright, so now let me show you a very simple fundamental here. Now I have these two cylinders here, and let's say my light source is coming from the right. So I have a light, it's coming in this direction here, and sometimes I'm gonna start with the one on the right. So I'm gonna give you two examples. Sometimes what we do is that we know that the light source is coming from the right, and what we do is we put the light here like so, and then we do a gradient like so, done like this, right? And what happens here is that we fail to understand what the bounce light does, and we end up with a schematic here of, we divide this in three portions. We have a light value here, we have a medium value here, and then we have a dark value here, right? And when we apply the bounce light, it doesn't go this way. These two actually switch. So I'm gonna do the opposite here on the left side. So my light source is still from the right, so I'm still gonna put my light on the right side. But now my dark, I'm gonna put it right in the middle, like so. And now we have a schematic here of light, because my light source is coming from the right side. I have a dark, and then I have a medium because of my bounce light. My light source is coming here and then bouncing off and hitting this section here. So instead of going light, medium, dark, I'm gonna go light, dark, medium to accentuate that bounce light coming from the opposite direction of the light source. And if we look, for example, at our model here, you can see it very clearly. Let's take a look at this arm. My light source is coming here, so I have a light here. I have a very dark on this portion here, very dark, and then I have a medium on this section because of the bounce light that's coming up, right? So light, dark, medium. That's gonna accentuate my bounce light. It's also gonna accentuate my core shadow, which we're gonna talk about later. And then I have my central light. All right, so let's go to the demo real quick and try to apply all these things.
Alright guys, that's it for episode 1. Thank you very much for stopping by. I really hope that you guys learned something out of these 6 fundamentals that I covered in this episode. If you want to try them out, I really encourage you guys to try a very simple scene with these 6 things and share it in the comment section so I can actually take a look at it. That would be awesome. And if you have any comments or questions about this week's episode or something that you would like to learn in Photoshop on how to do, maybe a tip or trick or how to do something, make sure you put that in the comment section as well so I can actually take a look at it and address it in future videos as well. And if you like the content, feel free to subscribe, hit the like button, and share with your friends as well. I would really appreciate it. Thank you guys, and I'll see you guys in the next one.